So we're on, I think, starting paragraph 18 today, I do believe, and focusing on the events, the prophesied events that lead up to the establishment of the kingdom, from the return of Christ up to the establishment of the kingdom. And that all has to do with this, events surrounding this verse. This verse 6 focuses on a particular part of that, which happens almost midway through that period, where the proclamation or an invitation goes out to all the nations of the earth to accept Christ, and they have the everlasting gospel to preach to them, as it says here, preached unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, that they should accept Christ, or of course the alternative is not good. You have to face the consequences of rejection.
There's quite a few resources here, and some of which I really haven't been mentioning too much. There is if you ever want to have any help, if you're marking your Bible or anything, we have this is a Bible marking. Part of this goes along with this, and if you ever are marking your Bible or something, I can print this out, or you can I can also email it to anybody that would so desire. It's just some suggestions as to notes that you can place beside your verses, and they're not totally comprehensive. They're just kind of reminders to let you know what the verse is about. So anyway, the timeline that we are in is this period. It starts with Christ returning, the resurrection and judgment, goes through the march of the rainbow angel, I guess you'd call it, and the Armageddon battle, and where we're at right now is the next one here is the number 19. The proclamation of the everlasting gospel takes place after or about the time of the construction of the temple. And coinciding with that would be the regathering of first of all, the tribes of Judah, and then the work of Elijah in gathering the 10 tribes. And after that follows the final grinding of the remnants, the image that may remain of the political powers of the north, the ground to power, leaving only the state church system and its political remnants to destroy as the final events. So that's what this has all been about, and we left off, I think we read paragraph 17 last time, did we? Yeah. So the summary of that paragraph was talking about the mid-heaven invitation and the fact that it will polarize national and international politics and nations and divide them into two camps. Those who will be prepared to accept the new divine administration for what it is would be the one camp, and the other camp would be those who will reject and oppose it for what they perceive it to be, and which is the Antichrist. These are termed in prophetic scripture as the sheep and the goats. The sheep on the one hand, those who accept, and the goats on the other, those who reject. And as we go into the next few paragraphs, we'll see how they will be dealt with accordingly. Gordon?
I was just wondering, will there not be a class of people that don't perceive Christ as either they just don't want to let go of, there will definitely be those who perceive him as the Antichrist, but there may be some who are just non-religious, who just don't want anybody to mess with their, I guess not important point, but just don't want any change. They just like it the way it is.
Yeah. probably less so after this proclamation goes forth. I think that's the idea here, is that the tendency will be to polarize. It will be to get the fence sitters off the fence and decide one way or the other. That's it.
That's our job now, is to put a bug in the ear of those who are fence sitters.
Yeah. But, I think that inevitably there will still be those who are in that class that Gordon was just talking about. And this mid-heaven proclamation is addressed to all of those. Both sides, both the sheep and goat side, and those who are undecided. There will be those who are decided, and nothing can sway them, no matter what. They will be there before and they'll be there after, both camps. But it's the fence sitters that will be the ones who will have choices to make.
Well, God gives the increase, and will that be done then as well? Or is there enough going on that they should be able to see for themselves?
Well, I think it's God gives the increase is a term meaning that we can't manipulate people to do,
Right.
He's created people with the power to choose,
Right.
and he expects them to use that power to choose. Yes.
Just kind of going back to the introduction there, but I guess I've always envisioned, and probably wrongly so, that, just coming off the quote, that Elijah must truly come first. I always kind of initially envisioned that he would be at work, even before Christ returns. It means that he must come first, meaning he would come before Christ, but yet it seems like his real work starts at this point here, once Christ is established in Jerusalem, and then the proclamation starts. Elijah's work focused on the Jews is that effort.
Right.
So I guess I'm trying to understand the context of coming first. Maybe that's from the current Jews today that are alive. From their perspective, that'll be the first real thing that they see, is Elijah coming to call them. Maybe, I don't know. Trying to piece that
The
together.
event that happens from their perspective of things.
Yeah.
Important.
Well, I was just thinking too, like I think I said later as well, but he would be resurrected along with everyone else is resurrected, so obviously he's there, but I think it's a reference to the preaching effort that will happen, heal Israel, natural Israel, previous to the setting up the kingdom. Not what it means by first.
Yeah, I think you got to go back and look at this timeline and see what, everything that happens preliminary to this proclamation of the everlasting gospel. Everything in this first bracket here, you might say, are the first and second brackets, the 2 periods of 10 years, are all events that have to do more with Christ and the saints and the things that directly affect them. The remainder of the world, those, again we go back to the people maybe who are kind of unaware or disinterested and things like that, as well as the people of that will encompass all nations, including the Jews and including Israel. The first events that will happen in this balance of time that has to take place between here and setting up the kingdom will be Elijah will have to come first. It will be a preliminary effort in these events that follow. So, it's bringing them to Christ. Just like you go back to the time when Christ first appeared, when he first came. What was John the Baptist doing? He was introducing, preparing people's minds to accept Christ. And he was likened to Elijah. Pardon?
Yeah, there's that quotation, then they shall look on him whom they pierced and mourn, referring to natural Israel. And at what point is that referring in this? Would that be at the proclamation or
Yeah, I think it's about, as they're regathered and brought into the land and introduced to this new administration and Jesus Christ. Again, I think it's first the work of Elijah and then Christ. That's what the first is in relation to. Bringing them to Christ. Preparing their minds to accept it. Okay, probably get more chance to talk about this as we go along anyway, but we'll go on into paragraph 18, which talks about the classification of nations. This classification of sheep and goats determines the final alignment of the north and south world powers. It says, but the Holy One of Israel is not the shepherd of the goats. Their shepherd is the false prophet of the Catholic world who claims to be the God of the earth, successor of St. Peter and vicar of Jesus Christ. This shepherd of the goats is the lawless antagonist of the great shepherd of the sheep, and will be found stirring the goats up to the rejection of the angel proclamation and to the declaration of war against the chief of the flock, the house of Judah. The issue, however, will not be dealt with. The rejection of his proclamation by the goats and their shepherds and their preparations for war will arouse his indignation. As it is written in Zechariah 10:3, mine anger was kindled against the shepherds, and I punished the goats. The when and the how are expounded in the succeeding sentences, saying, for Yahweh Tzvaoth, he who shall behold the eternal power, hath visited his flock, the house of Judah, and hath made them as his goodly horse in the battle. They shall be as mighty men who tread down their enemies in the mire of the streets in the battle. And they shall fight, because Yahweh is with them and shall be seen over them. And that quotation, the last one here, is from the 9th chapter of Zechariah, verse 14, which is good to bring to our attention there. He's talking about, he says, I've bent Judah for me, filled the bowl with Ephraim, which is significant there of Israel, the 10 tribes, and raised up thy sons, O Zion, against thy sons, O Greece, and made thee as the sword of a mighty man. The Lord shall be seen over them. That's the quotation he uses there. And the Lord shall be, Yahweh shall be seen over them. And his arrow shall go forth as the lightning. The Lord God shall blow the trumpet, and shall go with the whirlwinds of the south. The Lord of hosts shall defend them. And they shall devour and subdue with slingstones, and they shall drink, and make a noise as through wine. And they shall be filled like bowls, and as the corners of the altar. So that's the prophecy that he's using there as indicative of the time of the end and the nature of the work of Elijah in doing this, really, and the work of Judah. He bent Judah for me, so Judah is like the bow, and Ephraim is the arrow. So you see how the two tribes, the 10 tribes, work together in bringing these events about. So the summary here, the deception put forth by the very confident but equally misled leaders of the church and her daughters will sadly cause her followers and many others, including some of the political independent nations that are left, to look on Christ and call him a child of the devil, as did the religious leaders, the Pharisees and Sadducees at his first appearing, and who persuaded the people to put him to death. So in effect, they call him the child of the devil, or in effect the Antichrist, against whom must be mustered every last possible resource of resistance for the purpose of his destruction. In putting down this challenge to divine authority and rejection of the invitation, it appears that Christ will employ the use of the tribes of Judah as his battle axe, in which there is a type of poetic justice there.
Would this be the 10 tribes, or no, the 10th that's left remnant will be some of the first to accept it? Because they're already in the land, if I understand
He's
it.
talking here about those who are outside of the land that they can be brought in.
Oh, I see.
They all will have to be brought through the process of preparation to accept and the final acceptance. Whether they all accept them at the same time or in stages, or whether it waits till they're all brought in and it all happens at one glorious ceremony or whatever it might be, or whether it happens in each accepting in their own on their own time as they're brought in. These things I don't think are really we have the detail there to say.
Because the scriptures speak as though those 10th that come through the tribulation will be in the land and they'll accept him.
Is it 10th or 3rd?
Well, whatever.
And it's a type.
Yeah.
Just, changing a little bit here, the doctrine of supernatural devil plays so well into this Antichrist theory, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's really a destructive doctrine because it's so easy to blame a supernatural power and claim that we have to be against that and allied with God's forces as if God is weak or something. That, I don't know what the thinking behind it is, but instead of seeing the devil for what it is, which is mankind, the potential for evil in mankind.
Yeah, the idea of the supernatural devil almost sets up a confrontation between two powers, one of which is God and the other is the power of evil, and saying that God really has his hands full in dealing with that. Whereas if you put the devil as the human nature, our own makeup and our own worst enemy inside of us, then it doesn't make God weak. It makes him a God of choice. He's saying you have to choose. And the only reason that I'm not putting that, totally destroying that power right now is because I'm leaving it up to you to choose. And that's how my name is glorified. So it doesn't leave him weak or impotent looking. That's it.
I think that will also play into the polarity that you talked about, because whether people have religious inclination or not, most of them are invested from their childhood with a fear of the devil. And all of a sudden, if everybody's running with the battle cry to go and fight against Satan because he's going to take over the earth, there's going to be a lot of those people galvanized into action where nothing else would get them going.
There's a couple of words here, Yahweh, Tizveath, or Sibaha is the word is pronounced in the Yahweh Sibaha. And just look at those again. It's the self-existent or eternal Jewish national name of God, Jehovah, which is really, the J is really a Y. It's Yahweh. There's no, the J in Hebrew is always pronounced as a Y. There is no Y in Hebrew, so that's why there's always been a lot of controversy over whether it's Jehovah or Yahweh. Really, it's all the same.
There's no Y in Greek?
No Y in Hebrew. The Y and the J are the same.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that, and then Sabah. There's the pronunciation Sabah. Or the B and the V again are again pronounced. The B is always pronounced like a B. So it's Sabah. Abram. And this is from a mass of persons or figurative things, especially regulated, organized for war, an army, campaign, literally or figuratively. So we can see why it's a very appropriate title. Therefore, the divine authority in that day will truly be Jehovah or Yahweh of armies. He who shall be hosts, the eternal power. Very appropriate term. And that, of course, that's what occurred. We see that in, oops, sorry about that. Knocked myself out of need to be here. Okay. What did I read before? 18, there we go, yeah. Okay. What I wanted to do here was to go to the quotation where that term occurs. Right here, verse 15. The Lord of hosts shall defend them. That's where the Yahweh Sabaoth.
In that God has chosen Israel to be His people to manifest His purpose. This is a continuation of that, where they are kind of the first of all nations, as nations, to be brought back, first to be purged, but so all other nations. But it's kind of a continuation of that, where He's chosen Israel to be that sort of microcosm or cameo of His purpose with the whole earth. Fits very nicely that He brings them back into the fold first as a nation.
Yeah, it's very, it's very methodical and very orderly and very much in line with what He does.
Okay. Question, I guess, with God and Christ using Israel and Judah this way, is this where they're reduced to a third or a sixth? Or
that was prior. That was in the campaign against Jerusalem by the power of the north, coming up from Egypt when He hears tidings of the north and the east, and draws them into the land. And just prior to the Armageddon campaign, goes into Jerusalem and knocks out all the inhabitants there, reducing the Jewish, according to the prophecy from Zechariah, here 2/3 perish and 1/3 flee to Moab, and then go back, at the time or just prior to the time of the March of Christ of the Saints into Jerusalem.
That makes a lot of sense, because if God was to use this moment here to do that work, it would kind of be contradictory to who he is and his presence and making a proclamation.
Yes. And, you know, and the only gray on all of that, I guess, is whether Elijah has been actively working at the same time, even as the Battle of Armageddon is ongoing.
Right.
And that they all kind of come into the land around the same time as that third remnant does, or whether they are the first and the others come after. You know, it kind of appears to me like it might be the case, but like I say, that's a little bit of a gray area that is quite subject to interpretation and speculation.
Just a little while ago, you had a quotation there, I think it's from Zechariah, about make a noise as through wine and the altar being filled to the corners. And I thought that was kind of a strange thing, but is that a reference to...
was this one, or no, it must have been
the horns of the altar? That one? The horns? Yeah. That one, they're still right to the corners. This...
verse 15. Yeah. They shall drink and make a noise.
Yeah.
As through wine they shall be filled like bowls, and as the corners of the altar.
Is that a reference to the fullness of the conversion? Like it will fill the altar up like it's...
I think so, yes.
A time rejoicing, where it's making noises through wine and gladness, rejoicing, and it filled with reference to complete happiness and the multitude. I would say, I'm asking.
Maybe that take the hands, as they were, I'm not sure between Bell and Sid whether how big their first did.
Just to put a little question on that, though, I read that verse as saying, "They shall be filled like bowls, and they shall be like as the corners of the altar," not necessarily filled like the corners of the altar.
That's the first time I've seen that corners of the altar, because when we were in Israel, they said they weren't horns that were on the altar. They were actual
Projected.
No, they weren't horns. They were just corners that were built up.
That's what I mean by projected. They're just corners that were
Yeah,
raised.
I never noticed that before, but it's...
I guess that kind of changes my comment a little bit, but I think the expositor interprets that to be the horns, meaning, of an animal, the horns is its offense.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the expositor interprets corners of the altars to mean, is that it's an attack.
Well, but it is true what Donna was saying when they were brought into question as to whether they were actually horns as the horns of an animal. They were actually raised sections of that part of the altar. And there is an old remnant of an altar. We didn't actually get to see it, but it was in...
I saw pictures of it.
What's that now? It's just by Beersheba. Or maybe it was at the old town site of Beersheba. We were a little too late getting there. It was closed when we got there. But it said there is a replica of a very, very ancient Israelite altar there. It shows exactly how it was built. It was next year.
You kind of got to maybe think back to what was the original purpose of the horns and the corners of the altar, and were they not used to tie down the sacrifice? So I'm sure that plays a part in this verse, but I'm not clear as to how that goes. But
something maybe we can do a little research on for next time. Probably muck around here a little bit on it without really being definitive here right now, but we can maybe look it up for next week.
I just thought maybe it was a reference to filling completely.
I think that the filling is the idea there.
Normally you wouldn't go right out to the corners, but if you've got nowhere else to put them, you'd use every corner available.
Horns, power.
No.
But Paul made it clear that that was not horns, it was corners in
Yes.
in Hebrew, didn't he?
Oh,
Yeah, in the Hebrew it's not, yeah, it's in Hebrew it's not horns either, it's true.
I've always heard it was going on.
Yeah.
You didn't know.
that may just be a reference to kind of a projection.
Mhm.
Just like
Definitely there were projections, I mean, there were raised areas and, there was man-made or whether they used a horn and it appears it didn't. But,
Just, just to sort of back that up, I mean, I believe then in automotive, the pieces of vehicles frame that extend ahead of the front wheels are referred to as the horn.
yeah.
Wow,
Very good.
I didn't know that.
So some good, interesting thoughts there. But like I say, I think I'll just make a note of that to pursue a little bit for next week. To come up with something a little more definitive on that.
What is that quotation?
That was the 14 and 15.
9.
Of what?
Or 9 and 15. Zechariah 9 and 15. All right, the next one here is paragraph 19, talks about the powers of the South respond favorably to the proclamation. So the acceptance of the Angel Proclamation by the British power will plant the Lamb power in all their dependencies. Sheba, Dedan, the Hindu Tarshish, which would be India, Australia, New Zealand, the Cape, which is South Africa, British North America, and the West Indies will be ends of the earth and isles afar off, from which the Gentiles shall come to the great shepherd, and to whom they shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanities, and things in which there is no profit. That's from Jeremiah 16, verses 4 and 9. It says, death from evil diseases will overtake them. This is about the prophecy about what would happen to the people and as on account of their disobedience and their idol worship. There will be no weeping for them, and their bodies will not be put to rest. They will be like waste on the face of the earth. The sword and need of food will put an end to them. Their dead bodies will be meat for the birds of heaven and for the beasts of the earth. And then for the Lord of armies, the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, has said, see, before your eyes and in your days I will put an end in this place to the laughing voices and the voice of joy, and to the voice of the newly married man and the voice of the bride. It will be that when you say all these words to the people, and they will say to you, why has the Lord done all this evil against us? What is our wrongdoing, and what is our sin which we have done against the Lord our God? And then, I think there's another verse there we haven't just missed. I don't see the exact verse that he's referring to there. Can I copy that down, right?
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for that,
Sure.
surely your fathers have inherited lies, vanities, and things.
This is Jeremiah 16 and 9.
Is that in time? Did I just miss that?
Or 9 is not on there.
Right here.
19 maybe. 19? Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I think this is just a different translation is what this is. Yeah. This is, that's why we're missing it here. The heritage of our fathers is nothing but deceit, even false things in which there is no profit.
Okay. That is a different.
Just a different way of saying the same thing.
Version.
Yeah. O Lord, my strength and my strong tower, my fortress, my safe place in the day of trouble. The nations will come to you from the ends of the earth and shall say, the heritage of our fathers is nothing but deceit, even false things in which there is no profit. So that is speaking about the great transformation that will take place from what they have been accustomed to doing to what will be the new focus. This honest renunciation of the wisdom of our ancestors, then, by angel proclaimers of the truth, proved to be folly, will prepare them for a hearty cooperation with Judah in slaying the beast and giving his body politic to the burning flame. So this is reference then to the Gentiles. This reference about surely our fathers have inherited lives, vanity, and things in which there is no profit. It will be a reference to the change of thinking of the southern power nations. The day of eternal doom will then have arrived for republics throughout the world. The fate of the United States, so-called, will depend upon the response they may return to the proclamation, which is sure to be announced throughout the Western Hemisphere. If they reject it, Judah and his allies in British America, as the forces of the rainbowed angels standing upon the earth and sea, whose progress is as pillars of fire, will be at hand to enforce obedience with the two-edged sword of divine indignation. The only alternative in this unparalleled time of trouble for North and South America will be submission or desolation. Annexation to the little kingdom of Judah, in accordance with the law proceeding from Zion, will be an indispensable condition, without which neither this nor any other country can obtain exemption from war, pestilence, famine, and desolation. We can hardly expect that the United States will transfer themselves to the dominion of Judah's lion peaceably. If wise men were in place and power, they would doubtless be prompt to serve Yahweh with fear, to rejoice with trembling, and to kiss the sun, lest he be angry and they perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. That's from Psalms 2, verses 11 and 12. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the sun, lest he be angry and he perish from the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in him. But experience teaches that wise and prudent men do not find their way into office, and where fools reign, the people perish. The prospects of the country are dark and threatening, and it is much to be feared that model Republicans will not be disposed to accept their destiny until they have been broken with weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. So you don't have a whole lot of good to say as far as, or positive to say about us fellow Americans in that time, that coming time. Anyway, so in summary, the nations that make up the King of the South are prophesied to accept the divine authority embedded in the rainbowed angel of Christ and the saints. However, even with regard to that, there will be a necessity to bring down the pride of man, which so dominates the politics of developed and independent countries.
And then at the thing about kiss the sun, it reminded me a little bit about our first readings that we have now, because they were told to go to Babylon without, this is what you do. And there was a certain group that wouldn't go, and they were destroyed. They were banished. Well, this is also saying, like, submit and go with it. You may not like it at this time, but do it. Because you're going to perish, just like they did by not going into captivity in Babylon.
Give it up.
Give it up.
For the distance.
But that's easier said than done.
Yeah.
But you believe that's not.
Sorry.
The whole premise of the American country is based on freedom, right? That's the big thing about it.
Yes.
Independence.
Absolutely, independence. And that's what that's the kind of the
Goes right against that.
content of the summary here, you know, that it's developed and independent countries that will have more of a problem with that than developing countries. You know, we see this in Kenya. I mean, why is it that we've got 18 baptisms there in the last little while, and it's so hard to get one new person to come to the truth here? It's the same kind of thing. In developed and independent countries, there's a sophistication that kind of leads to, you know, rejection.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Every man doing that which is right in his own eyes, which is the basic principle behind democracy. Is I have a right to choose and to self-determine here. But that's spreading all over the world. And by the time Christ returns, it may be pretty well finished that fermenting process, which, because it's been so long in the U.S., for instance, and Canada as well, but it's almost run its course, and people are seeing the need for, you know, there's a little bit of, from some quarters, there's a little bit of humility coming out of the fact that you can see the quality of it too. But that's not widespread, but there is that element here that realize, just as Catherine said there about Britain, you know, that was really a very telling statement. He said it starts right in the homes, not improper discipline and so forth.
Yeah.
There's the realization, the beginning of the realization that we need guidance on these things. Can't just do what we like.
Anita, I'm sorry.
Wasn't that why the Statue of Liberty was sent from France over to the United States? That whole connection was right there in that statue.
Good. Yeah, thanks for reminding us about that. Of course.
Just going back to that, sure you're published in your advice. I'm wondering if that's not a reference to so-called Christianity. You know, because it is the Gentiles, but it's the ones that are connected with King of the South, and all of a sudden they're realizing that we have to write about this.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, because this will have a very much of a focus on you know, a change of religious thought and focus on faith.
Yeah, just kind of relating back to our thoughts there of King of the South, I guess, accepting Christ, and the difficult time that'll be. You just look at what's told about the message to the Ecclesia at Laodicea. It says, "Thou sayest, I am rich, increased in goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched, miserable, and poor, blind, and naked."
Right.
That's pretty much it to a T, isn't it?
That's right, and that is significant of the state of things at the time of the end. Is the message to Laodicean Ecclesia, ecclesiastically, and for sure. And that's it.
There are some people who believe that there will be quite a backlash against particularly the Vatican, but also the other ecclesiastical powers in the earth. Once there is a realization that they've been sold a bill of goods, there will be quite a backlash against the churches amongst the population.
Yes, and I think we'll be dealing with that a little later, God willing, in further chapters of Revelations. It talks about it, and how there's a backlash against the state church system.
So this would be sort of the beginnings of that thought process. Well, wait a minute, we've been, this
So
all
the
is
Billy
wrong.
Goods, yeah. Yeah, one of the, really, it's the largest fraud ever.
You can't perpetrate it either.
Gordon?
Just in the news about, I don't know, it's Madrid, there's protests against spending so much money on the books.
Yes.
That may not be for the right reasons, it may be just a monetary thing, but they certainly can see the excess of it.
There would have been times when money was of no consequence. The more money spent on that kind of thing, the better.
So it would be considered a great
An honor
sacrifice.
to do it, yeah. So, yeah, it's definitely, it shows that there's a change of thinking regarding these things.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's, the next one's a fairly short paragraph nonetheless. I think our time is pretty much at an end here. We're at 5 to the hour, so we'll probably have to stop at paragraph 19. Next week, God willing.